About 2,500 years ago, in the land of Greece, there was a city where weak people were not trained to survive. Instead, from childhood, they were prepared for war. The name of this city was Sparta. In Sparta, a child was considered valuable only when he could stand on the battlefield for his city. There, the king's son and the son of an ordinary soldier were trained almost the same way. But Sparta's king, Leonidas, was not like other kings. He was not a king who sat on a golden throne, who fought through the hands of others. He took up his own sword, stood beside his soldiers, and took the first step when danger came. One day, a message arrived in the city of Sparta that would change the fate of all Greece. From the east, a massive army was on the move. The great Persian king, Xerxes, wanted to conquer Greece. His army was so vast that people would say, when the Persian army moves, the earth trembles, and the number of its soldiers is like the grains of sand. The Persian ambassadors arrived in Sparta. They stood before King Leonidas and delivered a message. Lay down your weapons and surrender to the great Persian king. Silence spread through the palace of Sparta. The ambassadors thought the king would be afraid, but Leonidas raised his eyes and asked, "You want our weapons?" The ambassador replied, "Yes." Leonidas looked toward his soldiers. Then he said, "Come and take them." To the Persian ambassadors, those words were not merely an answer. They were a declaration of war. But Leonidas knew that the Persian army was enormous. He knew that even if Sparta's entire army went to war, the enemy's numbers would still be overwhelmingly greater. So he selected only 300 elite warriors. Each of them knew that they might not return alive from this journey. Before they left for battle, one soldier asked Leonidas, "King, we are only 300 men. The Persian army numbers in the thousands." Leonidas looked at him and said, "We are not going to match their numbers. We are going to make them understand how high the price of freedom is." 300 warriors left Sparta. But they did not yet know that standing before them was not merely an enemy, but one of the greatest battles in history. And at the end of their journey, there was a narrow pass where the fate of thousands of soldiers would be decided. The name of that pass was Thermopylae. The narrow pass of Thermopylae lay between the mountains. On one side were towering mountains, and on the other, the sea. For thousands of soldiers, this place was so narrow that a massive army could not easily spread out. When Leonidas reached the pass, he stood before his 300 soldiers. He looked at the narrow path between the mountains. Then he quietly said, "This is the place." One soldier asked, "Why this place?" Leonidas replied, "Because here, the enemy's numbers mean nothing." The Persian army was marching toward them. The footsteps of thousands of soldiers could be heard from far away. The sounds of horses, the clashing of weapons, the banners of war. With every moment, the great Persian army drew closer. But no one in the Spartan ranks fled. They gripped their shields tightly. They readied their swords, and they waited for the enemy to arrive. When Xerxes saw the number of Spartans, he was astonished. He thought that the people of Greece would surrender out of fear of his massive army. But now, standing before him, were only 300 men. Xerxes sent his ambassador. The ambassador said to Leonidas, "You still have time. Lay down your weapons and surrender." Leonidas looked at him. Then he said, "We still have time?" The ambassador replied, "Yes. If you surrender, you will remain alive." Leonidas turned his eyes toward the Persian army. Then he said calmly, "We did not come here to live." The ambassador was astonished. Leonidas added, "We have come to stand for our people." When this news reached Xerxes, he became angry. He thought that these 300 men were mocking his mighty army, and he launched his first attack. Thousands of soldiers marched toward the narrow pass. But when the first soldiers reached the Spartan lines, a wall of shields formed before them, one that was almost impossible to break. The Spartans stood so close to one another that each soldier's shield protected the soldier beside him. The Persian soldiers shouted and attacked, but every time their swords struck the Spartans' shields, a Spartan spear would thrust forward before them. One soldier would fall, but another soldier would immediately take his place. The Persian soldiers were many, but because of the narrow pass, the Persian army was powerful because of its numbers. But in this narrow pass, their numbers meant nothing. Hours of battle passed. The Persian army attacked again and again, but each time it crashed against the Spartan lines. By the time evening arrived, the Persian army had lost many soldiers, and the lines of the 300 Spartans were still standing. Xerxes became angry. He could not accept that such a small force had stopped his mighty army. Then he called for his elite warriors. They were the most highly trained and dangerous soldiers in the Persian army. Then he called for his elite warriors. They were the most highly trained and dangerous soldiers in the Persian army. Xerxes thought that this time the Spartans would be defeated. They marched toward the pass under the cover of darkness. Their footsteps slowly drew closer. The Spartans heard their voices. Leonidas raised his sword. His soldiers tightened their shields. Then the Persian elite warriors emerged from the darkness. The two armies clashed once again, but this time the battle was even bloodier. Sword struck against sword. Shields shattered. Screams echoed through the mountains. But still, the Spartans did not retreat. The Persian elite army was defeated as well. Xerxes watched everything from a distance. For the first time, he realized that these were not just 300 soldiers. These were men who were not afraid of death. But on that very night, when the Persian army could find no way to victory, a Greek man went toward the Spartans. His name was Ephialtes. He knew the paths of the region, and he revealed to Xerxes a secret that would change the fate of the entire battle. There was a hidden path through the mountains, a path through which the Persian army could reach the Spartans from behind. When Xerxes heard this, he smiled, because now he knew how to break through the defensive wall of the 300 Spartans from behind. Dawn had not yet arrived, but the Persian army was already moving along the secret path through the mountains. Leonidas still did not know that the enemy was coming not only from the front, but from behind as well. And when he realized the truth, only one question remained before the 300 soldiers. Would they retreat or fight until their last breath? Dawn had not yet arrived. The Valley of Thermopylae was still covered in darkness. But on the other side of the mountains, the Persian army was secretly moving along the hidden path. Leonidas was standing among his soldiers. Suddenly, a soldier came running. Fear was clearly visible on his face. He said, "King, the enemy is coming from behind us as well." Silence spread among the Spartans. Now the path of escape was closed. Before them stood the mighty Persian army. Behind them, thousands more soldiers were approaching. They were surrounded. One of Leonidas's commanders said to him, "We must retreat. If we move now, we may still be able to get out of here." Leonidas looked toward his soldiers. He knew that if all the Spartans withdrew, some of them might survive. But he also knew that if they stayed here, the Persian army would have no obstacle left to stop it from marching into the heart of Greece. Leonidas gathered his 300 soldiers. There was exhaustion on their faces. Their clothes were covered in dust and blood, but in their eyes, the same determination as before still remained. Leonidas said quietly, "We knew that this journey might be our last." No one spoke. He continued, "But we did not come here to think about death." He looked at his sword. "We have come here to stand for the people who still do not know that the war has reached their doorstep." One soldier raised his shield. Then another soldier raised his shield as well. Within moments, all 300 soldiers were ready for battle. The Persian army was closing in from both sides. Their numbers were so great that the foothills were filled with soldiers. But in the middle of the pass, only 300 Spartans stood. A small force against a mighty empire. The sounds of battle began once again. The Persian army attacked from the front. The Spartans brought their shields close together. Once again, they stood in the middle of the battle like a single body. Every sword that came toward one soldier was blocked by the shield of another. Every soldier who fell was replaced by another. But this time, the enemy was too numerous. An attack from the front, an attack from behind. Enemies on both sides. The circle around the Spartans was slowly tightening. Leonidas was still fighting among his soldiers. He brought down one enemy, then another. Then he saw one of his closest soldiers fall to the ground. Leonidas knelt beside him. The soldier was breathing heavily. He looked at the king and said, "We kept our promise." Leonidas held his hand and said, "Yes, my friend, you kept your promise." Then he left him in the middle of the battle, because the battle was still raging. The Spartans' numbers were dwindling, but the Persian army was still coming. Leonidas' sword broke in the middle of the battle. He picked up another weapon. That broke too. Then he drew his sword again, and even in the final moments, he kept fighting. But the Persian army surrounded him from every direction. Leonidas' soldiers tried to save their king, but the enemy was far too numerous. In the end, Leonidas fell to the ground. The king of Sparta was dead. And beside him, one by one, his 300 soldiers also fell. In the end, the pass of Thermopylae fell silent. The voices of the 300 warriors were silenced.